live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever, it is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. I can sense the sigh of relief on Dominic Guanzon's end over here. Been a minute since he's hosted his show. We got no Joe Viso, no Giuseppe on the show today. Dom, how are you holding up? 3 monitors and all.
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. And I say 3 monitors because I wanted to, as I said before, like, the fact that Joe does this on, I think 1, maybe 2 monitors is insane to me because there's so much. There's so much to do. There's the Zoom, there's the OBS, there's the pictures. It's a lot, but he does a great job of it. And he did that. It was a cool clip thing in between. But yeah.
He's really executed the rebrand to stellar degree in recent times too. So we got to give him a shout out there. We are live though tonight to talk Deadpool and Wolverine. That is where we are headed for today. We've got a big show in store, Deadpool and Wolverine. And then we're going to touch on this article regarding a producer of Madam Web talking about the movie's failure. So we have really 2 opposite ends of the spectrum here as far as superhero movies are concerned. I'm excited to talk Deadpool and Wolverine because I think it doesn't leave you. It doesn't leave you without something to grab or with something to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to talk about this because I do think, unlike most superhero movies, this one does leave you with quite a bit to chew on. So I'll be interested in hearing your take on it as well. First things first, though, my friend, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing a-okay. I got the house to myself for 20 days. Chelsea's going on a big trip to Europe again.
Oh wow!
For effectively for work. So we got some meal prep cooking inbound. Cook once, eat like 6-7 times. Let's see what happens. I'll try not to burn the house down. But yeah, other than that, it's just a busy ass summer.
That it is. August is tomorrow, somehow, some way.
That's insane.
Hotter than hell out there right now.
It's humid. That's the thing. It's
humid.
humid. I've been to
miserable.
Vegas, and every time, it's very hot, very warm when the sun's out, of course. But even at like 100 degrees, it's not the worst thing in the world. When you've been in Chicago during these humid summers, because the dry heat. What's that Midwest saying? It's the humidity that kills you.
It's the humidity that kills you. That's for sure. Yeah, and it is dreadful to just be out there today. It didn't get as hot. Like over the weekend, they were talking about how it was supposed to be hotter out here in Eastern Iowa. We were supposed to have temps in like real temperatures in the mid 90s. And we haven't cracked that out here yet. We're at like 88 today.
88. I think it got up to like 90 here.
Yeah, I was surprised because not to go into a whole meteorology discussion, but having a friend who's a meteorologist.
Yeah, that was last time. That was Twisters.
He told me that he told me years ago. He said the 2 hardest things for meteorologists to predict and why these are the 2 things they're most often wrong on, he said, are tornadoes and blizzards. Yep. He said those are the 2 hardest things to predict.
What a surprise.
He said heat is very easy to predict. He said heat's very easy to predict because of jet streams and patterns and data. He's like, those are very easy to predict. He said polar vortexes are pretty easy to predict. But like he said, like snowfall totals and tornadic activity, difficult as hell to predict, even with all the technology. So I was kind of surprised that like a week ago, like I'm serious, this weekend, I thought we were going to get temperatures like 98. That's what they were talking. But I almost wonder if they overestimated the temperature as opposed to the real feel. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But at any rate though, and that's neither here nor there, but knowing a meteorologist, I thought I'd throw that in there. But I got a really good show today. And I'll tell you right now, I have to look at myself now for the next hour. I look polished today. I got a haircut today. which I
Yeah.
desperately needed. Shaved finally because I wasn't gonna shave until I was gonna get the haircut too. So, like I said, turn my D plus into a C minus over here. So we're ready to go.
Ooh.
At any rate, we are talking Deadpool and Wolverine. New Marvel movie, 50 something. I don't know what we're on now. This is the first Marvel movie I've seen since Guardians 3. Because famously, during my
Wow.
Guardians review on stevepulaski.com and on the show, I said that was going to be my jumping off point for Marvel. Now, I still consider myself off the bandwagon. I looked at the rest of their Phase 4 lineup and Phase 5. There's nothing I want to see. There's nothing I want to see. I don't care to see Fantastic Four again. I will give it to them. The Captain America Brave New World trailer is very good. It's a very good trailer. And I'm sure those who will see it will enjoy it. I will not be one of them. I've said before, I'm tired of Marvel. I really am. I'm tired of Marvel. After Endgame, which felt like a logical capstone for the series as a whole, I've been really failed to be gripped by really much else of what they've had, save for the occasional Wakanda Forever. I thought was pretty good. Quantum Mania was a bitter fucking disappointment for a franchise that was really good, was really rock solid. And Guardians 3 just felt really strong in so many respects. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to end Marvel, I'm going to go out on a high note. But Deadpool and Wolverine, this felt like a cultural event. I will say this felt like a cultural event. And if nothing else, and we're probably going to be the meat of this review. This movie's existence, I think, is underscored by the fact that it's a eulogy to 20th Century Fox's era of Marvel, because Disney famously acquired the studio in 2019. Now, clearly, I have a lot of thoughts, but I want to bring this up first. Very good use of Green Day's excellent song, Time of Our Life, in the end credits of this movie. Excellent use. But I could not be the only one. I told Catherine that during the credits. I said, you know, there's something off about watching a eulogy to a movie studio and all of its works that is curated by the studio that who's just made the movie we watched, who fucking cannibalized it in its monopolistic pursuit to own everything.
It's very like mob boss who just whacked the guy, but then like he goes to the funeral and goes to the mom and it's like, anything you need, here's $500. We'll take care of you just like your son did. And they're the guys that whacked him. It's very much like that. I get it too. But yeah, you know what? It was a good one. It was a good one. Those ending credits. I mean, look, they gave him something, right? Let's not forget,
they did.
The other movie studio, they're rich bastards anyway. So whatever. It's all just rich people playing, throwing money at each other. But in terms of, I just really wasn't expecting it. And I'll get into this with the meat of the review, but it's like, I don't like playing into the hype of things. And in addition to that, I have been really getting into The Boys. In fact, I like binge watching in the past 2 months. I am almost caught up I'm like halfway through season 4. And then there was also the spinoff series that I also watched. And the nice thing about The Boys is that it completely pokes fun at the standard superhero movie, especially the Marvel ones post 2008, but even some of the earlier ones as well, and how gaudy and, what used to be the standard. And even with all of that and how elevated that feels with the political commentary and all that with The Boys, and I'll shit on the really lackluster Marvel film trope any day. At least Marvel is a standard that, man, those pre-Iron Man movies, they were really hit or miss. From the 90s to the mid 2000s, they were really hit or miss.
They were
in a way that was just bad. People are like, oh yeah, it's like how people, one critique that I saw out there, for like the Mario movie, the recent Super Mario Brothers movie, where it's like, oh, this feels too safe. This feels too normal. This feels too standard. The original Super Mario Brothers with, what's his name, and John Leguizamo, the
Bob Hoskins.
Yeah, thank you, Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo. At least it was interesting. It was, there was like some spiciness to it. And I'm like, nah, you're just making an argument to make an argument. That was a bad movie.
You read too many think pieces about like its existence.
1,000,000%. It's like, we can forget that movie happened. Let's celebrate the standard being here, and then let that be the low point, and then work from there, make it interesting. So in that sense, okay. And going into a third Deadpool movie, there was a lot of trepidation, and I don't know if you want to take it from there or I'll just keep ranting, but yeah.
Yeah, and here's where I'll kind of start. I guess I did start, but since Marvel's improbable 30-plus movie run that culminated with what I called the capstone of the franchise, the logical capstone of Avengers Endgame, the subsequent works for Marvel have been inconsistent, to say the very least. There's even a line that Deadpool throws to Wolverine and says, "Welcome to the MCU, Logan. You're joining at a low point." A line I'm surprised one of a couple lines I was surprised they allowed. But the problem with Marvel, and I don't want to make this a problem with Marvel thing, I'm just kind of giving a brief overview, but part of the problem of recent Marvel movies, I would say, besides, some would say the villain problem, which has always, I think, been an issue with them, the villain problem, besides the fact that I think the CGI and I think the effects crews have simultaneously been slashed, and they've been working under tighter deadlines. I think the effects have gotten a little sloppier too. In particular, I think you saw that really paramount with Quantumania.
Do less with less, yeah.
Yes. And you're also working with the multiverse, which has to be all computer generated, and then nothing is real. You're not watching anything that's actually curated, that's not on a computer. Beyond all of that, though, what's happening now is that, like, we're getting origin stories of Shang-Chi and the Eternals and other characters now, these really, like, I don't want to, D-tier Marvel characters, because they've exhausted Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. They've exhausted all the major players, and they've kind of put a ribbon on a couple of their stories. So what you're getting now is you're getting an influx of movies about second-tier characters. You're getting, or third-tier even, you're getting an overabundance, which Kevin Feige's even admitted, you're getting an overabundance of television shows that quietly became required viewing as opposed to like extracurricular assignments for diehard fans. They became required viewing whose stories play into the plots of the movies. And now Marvel's kind of in this like multiversal hellhole space, so to speak, where they've had to create the multiverse. I mean, hell, you have to use the multiverse in order to justify Wolverine getting brought back in this movie after Logan. And there's jokes about that Deadpool throws out there as well, about how now that Hugh Jackman's going to be doing this till he's 90 years old. Mm-hmm. And now that Marvel owns Fox. But essentially, though, if you look at this as a team-up movie, which is ultimately what it is, this is like a 48-hour style buddy movie, where you have Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, who doesn't shut up. You have Wolverine, who's not the original Wolverine either. You almost have to remind yourself that while watching. You're not watching Logan. You're watching like the drunken hack Logan from another multiverse, which is kind of amusing in itself. I'll start by saying this. The first thing I did like about this movie is that both of these characters, at first I was like, I didn't mention this in my review, but I remember bringing it up on the show. I thought, and I think this still would have been better, I would have loved to see a Deadpool and Spider-Man team up. I think that would have been perfect. A Tom Holland and Ryan Reynolds. I think that would have been perfect. I thought they were teasing and alluding to that when, if you remember the Spider-Man Homecoming posters that had Deadpool photobombing it, like the one photo or the one poster of Tom Holland Spider-Man laying on the edge of the fountain. There's a Deadpool, one of him pushing him into the water or knocking him off a building. I thought for sure that that's kind of what they were alluding to.
That's probably going to be the next one in 5 years or so. I think that's going to be the next one.
It might be.
This is bridging.
I thought that.
Yeah. This is not only a eulogy for Fox. This is also a transition into Marvel for these characters.
I thought that would have been better, but I think one of the things that does make this movie work to some degree is that it finds both of these characters, Deadpool and Wolverine, at low points in their life. Deadpool is a wallowing loser. He works at a car dealership. He wears a fake hairpiece. He's my favorite running gag of this whole thing is that this happened in the second movie too, is that he keeps pining and he keeps wanting to impress Vanessa, his fiance, who we never see or learn about. He can't join the Avengers. He's denied from that. So he's at this lowest point of his life. And then you have Wolverine, who's like an alcoholic who can't get over his own past failure. So these two are perfect for each other. They're like two losers in need of a redemptive story. And on that level, I think this movie does work.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. The nice thing about the Deadpool movies is that they could have been horribly, horribly misaligned from the script. But thankfully, they centered this absolutely insane character. This is probably a tamer version of Deadpool than what you'll probably see in comics and video games. The video game version of him that I think I rented one time, was it Nolan North doing the voice? Either way, that dude was unbearable because it was just obviously constant jokes. That's a given. But there's like hardly any grounding. You go right into the wackiness, right? It's like Bugs Bunny, but at least the original Bugs Bunny shorts were like 10 minutes long at best. So it's like, okay, you get small little microcosms. Imagine a 2-hour thing with Bugs Bunny and you don't have Michael Jordan there to balance it out. Like that's
he's like
just
Duke. He's like Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. But the nice thing about Deadpool in all of his movies, in all these Ryan Reynolds movies, is that he is grounded with family. He is grounded with love and all of that. And there is a clear side of him that is driven home so well. So I definitely want to commend all of these movies for handling this character so well. And that's the funny thing, is that even with Deadpool being handled so well as a character, outside of these movies, he is unbearable, as I alluded to before. And that's not even really anyone's or the studio's fault or these writers' fault. It's just the culture, right? Everyone wants to be Deadpool. Everyone wants to be the wisecrack and have the funny line at the perfect moment all the time. And that's why Deadpool is notorious in the cosplay scene and is notorious in, whatever other public scene, just for being just cringe as hell because everyone's trying to crack a joke at Comic-Con or something. And again, that's not this movie's fault. That's not anyone's fault that has the actual reins on this thing. So going into Deadpool and Wolverine, I was very nervous as the opening credits were starting to form. And then once the opening montage happens where they play a pop song to admittedly a very cool fight. There's a lot of great fights in this movie. When it cuts to Deadpool just dancing by himself, my face just dropped. I was like, oh no, no. Is this the movie? Is this the movie? Are we really doing this? And I got nervous for that opening, like 2.5 minute sequence where they play that song. And I could, like, no one was laughing in the theater that I could hear. It was, like a third full, spread out. I was on the side, so maybe I couldn't hear the lady on the far side of it. That was really having a good time. But for me, it felt like the air was sucked out of the room, and we were all collectively, "Oh, is this just going to be cringe? Is that what this is going to be? Has Comic-Con finally caught up to the actual product?" But thankfully, as the movie continued, what we continued to see was very clear character through lines, very, very clear themes, and a very adept, adaptation of all these disparate Fox characters into this really messy plot. I should say, what should be a much messier plot. But if you're at least somewhat familiar with those original Fox films, like I would really love to know someone who is there's two people I want to know that watch this movie. That are not me, which is someone who grew up on the X-Men films, the original Fox films, right? One, someone who's only seen Marvel from 2008 onwards. And two, someone who really hasn't seen much and is just walking in. What was their experience like? This has to be just 50% of the jokes going over their head. I don't know. But for me, and for you, I would think, for us, who this film is more catered to, I thought it was very tight and very effective. And I'll leave it there.
I will admit, I thought one of legitimately the most fun sequences in the movie is the opening titles. Uh, I enjoyed it. And the reason I enjoyed it was because, first off, they let the entirety of a great song play. The whole song plays in Sync's Bye Bye
Respect.
Bye.
Yep.
I mean, I have a feeling, I know there's some cameos we might want to talk about. I was kind of wrestling just back and forth right now. Like, do we want to ruin it? The movie made $200 million opening weekend. So I think that there's kind of grounds we can mention some things at this point. But I like the opening credit sequence. I like the energy it brings. I like how it starts on a fast note. And I thought the way they kind of interspersed the blood and bones with the opening credits, I don't think it's anything profound, but I thought it was engaging. And I thought, it wakes you up a little bit.
And also the balls to, like take literally the ending of Logan and like willingly, knowingly, winkingly desecrate that ending. But then you build on top of that, right? You're not just doing it for the laughs. True. But also to advance this plot, which I thought was like, hey, you know what? That's how you do it. You're not just taking a shit to shit on the fans. You're taking a shit for fertilizer to grow something new. There you go.
That's a beautiful metaphor. Yeah, I will say, first, I know what you're saying about how the plot could be a lot messier. I thought the plot was still a friggin' mess.
Sure.
With this thing. I think,
yes.
I don't know if it's as much mess. There's too much. It feels like there's too much
it really is.
Plot to go into this thing. Like, to the point when you have Deadpool having to, like, continuously, like, turn to the audience and be like, I promise we're getting somewhere. Like, that kind of thing. I almost think they overthought this. And I also think it's a symptom of the fact, too, that in order to justify Wolverine being in this movie, they had to go literally find another Wolverine in a different universe, too. This goes to show you just how many problems Marvel has at the moment, narratively speaking, that they have to, like, contort themselves into coming up with these narratives to justify their existence and justify the comebacks of these characters.
Yep.
The other thing I will say, and this is just another criticism I have, God, is this movie ugly. This thing is ugly. I mean, I know it takes place... It's saving grace is probably it takes place in a random ass garbage heap called the Void. But this thing looks like Mad Max Fury Road with no personality. This thing is ugly, hard to look at some points. It's not the CGI. I don't think the effects in this movie were bad. The effects are fine.
You think it's more fundamental design decision?
It's the design of this movie is ugly, is hideous. I that was the thing that like really stuck out to me too. Like if it wasn't for like songs like The Power of Love and Like a Prayer and some funny moments in this, I'm like, this thing looks as visually ugly as really anything Marvel has released. I don't know why they colored it the way they did. You have two very colorful characters who are so colorful in personality and in the literal sense that they pop in the foreground. And then everything behind them feels like an afterthought as to what everything looks like.
I do wonder because there's a lot of cameos, a lot of big name stars, a lot that you don't expect, or maybe you do. I don't know. But either way, I do wonder if everyone was present at all times for the shoot. I wonder if it was like, hey, this actor was green screen. Well, maybe not because they interact a lot.
It would be hard, like that scene in that cabin. It would be hard to do that if you had to if they weren't actually talking to one another.
Right, I know what you're talking about. I know in Endgame they were doing a lot of that because it was literally
there was a lot of reverse shot going on in that moment too. So I think you're right to be a little skeptical. There was a lot of reverse shot happening there. What's funny is I know we're kind of jumping all over the place, but so does this movie. That's how I justify it. And be careful what you wish for because you might get it. But you know what? It took me a minute to remember. But seeing Channing Tatum as Gambit, I'm like, oh my God, they were going to make a Gambit movie. I forgot about that. The director, let me remind people, because one of my best friends texted me and he was like, I didn't understand Channing Tatum. And I said, I don't think a lot of people are. I said, we talked about it on Sleepless, I believe, Joe and I, when that movie was going through hell. And it like came flooding back to me the moment that it like dawned on me.
It's the most forward in joke. Because it's development hell. You have to be like either into the superhero scene or into film to like, but I mean, it's like not to get it, but like just like be aware of that joke going blind into this movie.
It's true. Yeah, you have to have some sort of like not insider, but like some sort of
Yeah,
knowledge.
this most random
Gambit,
asinine, thing that they were gonna make. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who looked like Doctor, and he looks like Doctor Stranger. You know what I mean? Like to the
You know,
unknown person.
I was confused at first because I was like, didn't Channing Tatum play Gambit already in that one X-Men, that one Wolverine movie? But no, it was Taylor Kitsch, John Carter of Mars. It was him who played Gambit, in a completely different costume. This was a never before film, and you're right. They acknowledge it where it's like, where are you from? It's like, I don't know. I was always here. So it's like, yeah, this is.
And then he says some of us never get their story told at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And no, I will say I did crack the joke to Catherine. I said I think they canceled the Gambit movie because Channing Tatum couldn't hold an accent. But for those who don't know, Gambit was an X-Men character, and I could also make the joke that they canceled him. They canceled his movie because he wasn't Wolverine, because that seems to be the only fucking X-Men movie they know how to make is Wolverine. When there's literally, I don't think people realize, like the common viewer realizes, there's literally 100 X-Men, like men and women. Like there's a million X-Men
Yeah,
characters.
people think
they
there's
could
like
pick, and
5 or 6.
Wolverine gets 3 standalone movies.
Everyone forgets that Cyclops is the leader of the X-Men. People forget
Yes.
that. He's supposed to
Yeah,
be the
I know.
leader. That's his like main trait, even more than the laser eyes, is that he's the leader.
You know? Yeah, but Freddy Krueger with the beard gets all the movies. But moreover, though, Gambit was supposed to be a standalone movie, and Channing Tatum was going to be the title character. It was to be directed. I couldn't remember in the theater who the hell was going to direct it, but it was Rupert Wyatt who directed Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh.
And here's what happened with that movie. Because I remember us talking about this on Sleepless, albeit briefly, when we reviewed another Marvel movie. What happened was when Fantastic Four bombed, 20th Century Fox went back to the drawing board, and they basically sliced the budget for Gambit. But they would not let Rupert Wyatt and a couple other people rewrite the script. And Rupert Wyatt, he's been very public about this, he said, we could not do like 40% of that movie the way under the new budgetary restrictions after Fantastic Four bombed. We could not do the movie we wanted, but we weren't permitted to rewrite the movie. And I'm like, you're setting us up to make another Fantastic Four. That's what you're setting us up to do. So that's why he walked. He said, I'm not going to do this. Because the thing is, props to him though, because you know what? Directors know directors and people know industry people. We saw what Josh Trank went through, and Josh Trank, ascending filmmaker. It would have been a little bit different for Wyatt because he was coming off of Apes, so he already had his big movie. But still, like that could have killed Wyatt's career. But be that as it may, I really liked Gambit in this thing. I thought he was now. Like I said, be careful what you wish for. I say I do.
Can you
but
handle
I don't.
2 hours of him? Yeah, yeah.
I'd still take a 2-hour King Shark movie. I make no bones about that. But with Gambit, I don't know if I would have liked it, but I did think he was funny. He was funny. I thought even in some ways he outshined Wesley Snipes as Blade, which I think is a cool cameo, but I don't think Blade does a whole lot.
He doesn't do a whole. He's there, like he's the most cameo of them all, just for the sake of the cameo, just for the sake of the presence. And I mean, look, those characters that we've kind of spoiled there, I don't know, but either way,
200 million opening weekend. That's all I'm gonna say.
It was honestly just to see. It's a one last hurrah kind of thing. So you're absolutely correct in that we're gonna microdose these characters for this one sequence and these 3 scenes, and we're gonna have a good time. And that's exactly what they were built to do. That's what the fundamental purpose of those characters in this specific film was for, and it was absolutely perfect for what it was. They were there to kick ass.
It's amusing. It's amusing. And I like I said, I did like Gambit a lot, though. I really did. I thought he had some really fun one-liners. I thought Tatum just has a presence, and I think I needed like a Tatum palate cleanser after, just like his terrible character, not performance, terrible character in Fly Me to the Moon. Like I just needed a Tatum prime. I'm a big Channing Tatum fan. I always have been. So like I just needed something better, and I'm glad I got it in this. And then we also have Elektra, Jennifer Garner's back, who again doesn't do a whole lot, but it's just funny to see Elektra again. Like you mentioned earlier, you said it's like pre-Iron Man, the era when superhero movies were honestly, I mean, if you look back, There was a period of time when the only reliable franchise for superhero movies, and they had some early missteps, was X-Men.
And Spider-Man. And
That
Spider-Man.
and Spider-Man, of course. Okay,
But that was in the hands of Sony.
that was Sony's. That was Sony's property and Sam Raimi's baby too.
Yes.
So, and I mean, you had sprinkles of movies, like the one I always reference. Like if you go back, like if we ever had a conversation, like your favorite, take Spider-Man out of it because everybody our age loves Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire movies. Take Spider-Man out of it. If you pre-Iron Man, what was your favorite superhero movie, or what superhero movie did you like the most? You know what I would say? Ang Lee's Hulk.
God, I remember watching that movie at least twice, but I don't remember a damn thing about it.
I'm not saying it's high art, but I like that movie. I think that was a damn good Hulk movie.
I remember Ang Lee. He was doing like stop frame comic panel transitions. I remember that specifically because he was like the only one to really do it. Well, okay, Scott Pilgrim did a bunch of that, but that's Scott Pilgrim. In terms of like superhero movies, yeah, I think it was the only one to do that. That was interesting. And, we could get into like Batman and 90s Batman and all that stuff. But in terms of the Marvel stuff, it's really Spider-Man and X-Men. You could say, I mean, God, I looked it up. Days of Future Past, arguably the best X-Men movie.
Right.
In my opinion. That was 10 years ago in 2014. Insane. Insane to me. I know that's obviously well past Iron Man, but still, like, and even then they took like two immediate stumbles. It's like Days of Future Past was the salvation for the X-Men. It's like after X3, it was like we gotta and like some weird some Wolverine business going on with those two movies. Now we got Days of Future Past, and we are reset. We are rebooted. The timeline is fixed, and then two movies just kill that momentum. 1-2 punch. And then Logan.
What were they again? I know X-Men Apocalypse, which stands as one of the worst superhero movies I've ever sat through. And I've sat through Steel with fucking Shaq. Okay, like I know bad superhero movies. Apocalypse is one of the worst. Carry on.
I would have completely forgotten if I hadn't looked it up earlier. Dark Phoenix.
I thought that's what you were referencing. I didn't know if there was one in between though.
And then, and I know we're going way off book here, but like I said, this movie is a swan song to those 2 decades of film, and
stumbles and all.
God, do you remember not the Josh Trank Fantastic Four, those other two, the Jessica Alba, Chris Evans Fantastic Four? I thought those were pretty good. I thought those were solid.
Yeah, I never saw Silver Surfer. But the first movie wasn't bad. Like I remember, I think it was the first movie. I think it was. I don't think he directed the sequel. That killed Tim Story's career for a while. Tim Story's the guy who made Barbershop.
Okay.
And I always liked him as a director. I always thought he's kind of a pedestrian director, but I always thought he worked good with ensembles as seen in Barbershop, and I thought Fantastic Four. But yeah, you had Michael Chiklis as the Thing. Michael Chiklis from S.H.I.E.L.D.
Thing.
Really great thing. Yes, I totally agree with that. And it really that you were talking about the Super Mario Brothers movie, totally different can of worms, but that new Fantastic Four movie shows you that 2005 movie with the guy whose name I can never say, Grufford. I own Grufford. I can never say his name. That movie was not half bad, all things considered. But to kind of pivot back, though, I know we're going to butt up against our intermission here. Yeah. But going back to Deadpool and Wolverine, though, I guess I'll leave this as a cliffhanger. Like the amount of jabs that this script, written by 5 people, takes at Marvel that they allowed, I was a little surprised about. Now I know what's the skin off Marvel's ass. You know what I mean? At the end of the day,
it also helps their case.
It helps their case to acknowledge. I totally agree. They're not trying. This is not like the 3rd movie in the franchise. This is the 34th. So like they've earned this credibility and the fans' credibility to do this. But like, the one thing that made me laugh, and don't get me wrong, I didn't want to see any of this stuff, believe me. I've seen it enough in other movies. But what's funny to me is where the line is in this movie. You know where the line is because they keep bringing it up, but they never show it. There's multiple jokes about cocaine. There's multiple jokes about, like, ass play. and like they never show anything, and I'm not asking for it, okay? But I just think it's funny that they keep bringing that up, but they don't show anything, and I'm like, that's the line for Disney right there. That you are seeing it right here. That's the line right there that they won't cross. They don't care if you say it's a low point in the MCU, but they won't show that. Like, so I thought that was funny.
It's like Barbie and Mattel, where it's like, yeah, make fun of yourself. It'll make you. It's almost devious in a way. It's like, yeah, make fun of yourself because then you'll give yourself some buffer for the really bad shit that you're doing. Whatever the really insidious things, and you can get into the whole political situation there. But in terms of Deadpool and Wolverine, the number one thing I can say for its core is that it is very character driven with these main two actors, the namesake of this movie, and they hold pretty much all of the emotional weight as they should. And that is what keeps, and each time you inject a new character, inject a new, reference or joke, it's like a little push on this cart with no motor. A lot of weight on this thing, and there's no motor. But you get some good action. You just keep going with the momentum. Get some good jokes in there. Keep going the momentum, and it's very tight writing. Maybe the plot, yes, it's all over the place with the time, but at least it's tight writing. So in that sense, I'm having a good time.
We'll parlay into closing thoughts here. I also wanted to add too that like some of the self-deprecating jokes at Marvel's expense. Like I've been known to be a self-deprecating person too, and I don't remember. I think it was Woody Allen. It had to be one of my greatest, one of the greatest living directors. I think it was Woody Allen, who's the king of self-deprecation. I think Woody Allen said at one point, like, I beat up on myself because then it takes away from the critics what they can say about me. Because if I'm openly admitting it, it disarms my naysayers in a way. And he's like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, though. He said, I believe he said this in an interview. He's like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, though, because they always find something to say that's way worse. But he's like, at least I take the low hanging fruit. Like, at least I can own the low hanging fruit. So then whatever, I'm like, you had to think to come up with something to hate me for. Which I find admirable in its own way and have kind of adopted for myself. We'll be back here to kind of give closing thoughts, put a bow on Deadpool and Wolverine, and then segue to talk about what a Madam Web producer had to say about the movie's failure. So we're going to both ends of the superhero spectrum here. Live on Sleepless with Steve, Sans Joe Viso, me and Dominic Guanzon holding down the fort. It's the gruesome twosome, just like Deadpool and Wolverine. We'll be back in just about 90 seconds right here on Sleepless with Steve. Back and better than ever, it is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube, back from our Zoom workplace sponsored intermission. Talking Deadpool and Wolverine, kind of putting a bow on things here. I don't know if there's anything you still want to mention, Dom. I feel like I've done the majority of the talking like I generally do here. So if there's any other points that you'd like to bring up, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, just that how impressed I was that, going off what I said earlier. Oh, actually, real quick. To also add to your point about owning your failures and like just letting it be known, that's literally the climax to Eminem's 8 Mile, where it really is. Here he raps about himself and disses himself, and then hands the mic off to Anthony Mackie, to Falcon, and it's like, yeah, okay, go. I just insulted myself completely. You don't know anything else about me. Go for it, and that's yeah, for these companies, I think they're starting to wise up to it. They're getting a little more savvy, right? That doesn't make them inherently better morally, but they're being more savvy about it, which makes them a little more dangerous. But regardless, considering how much of a mess those Fox movies were, and don't get me wrong, there's some really good ones, but there's also some really, really bad ones, and it is all over the place, man. That's the kind of the pill that you take between Marvel and between and the other studios like Sony or Fox. And really, honestly, going back to that, I'm actually really glad that person made that tweet about or whatever between the Mario Brothers, the two big Mario Brothers movies, because that really does encapsulate it. Is it safe, or do you want something exciting but just absolutely messy? I don't know. But in terms of this movie, yeah, I'll just go into my star rating unless you have something else. For me, I think I had some really good laugh out moments. I really did. I'm gonna give this 3.5 out of 4 stars, which surprises even me.
Damn.
I know. It really did.
Very high on Deadpool
Very
and
high.
Wolverine.
Yeah.
I think I should have mentioned this probably in my opening statement, but I think this movie is appreciated, if appreciated, sort of like a work of sketch comedy. I think, and it's 5 writers, I think loans to that too. I think there's a part of this movie that stumbles into significance as it points out the flaws and foibles of newer superhero movies, such as like no character stays dead. The multiverse was created as a way to revive the fallen and the dead characters and extend other universes. The villain's always going to partly underwhelm due to not having the recognition and development of the hero who's going to inevitably defeat them. I will say, I think for as much plot as this thing throws at you, it still feels like an inessential movie in itself, which is kind of surprising when you put these two characters together. I think externally speaking, it has a lot going for it, being that it's a send-off or a eulogy to the 20th Century Fox and their Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. But I think it's undone a little bit to a fault by some needless exposition that I think ultimately doesn't really mean anything in the greater sense of the franchise, a franchise in Deadpool that I think has been pretty rock solid, which says something in itself, because Deadpool, as you said earlier, is an easy character to screw up, far easier to do wrong than it is to do right, as we've seen in the last. So for me, it's 2.5 out of 4 stars.
Yeah, that sounds right. And that honestly, that completely makes sense. I can definitely see how you came to that conclusion as well. I think for me, it's honestly like the nostalgia of it. Like, I've definitely got that bias, which is so funny to me because I really hate some of those movies. Like, I genuinely do. And I'm not even that into that era, but it's just the fact that I grew up with it and it was there, and that this movie was able to tie it up into a bow and complete that experience for me. This whole arc that we've had since the very first X-Men, and they celebrate it too in the credits, right? From the very first X-Men all the way through some of the biggest dumpster fires and some of the biggest, achievements. They were going through all that time. They were able to put a bow in it and complete this moment in time for me. So hell yeah, I'm biased, which is rare for me for a superhero film, quite honestly. So kudos to them and kudos to that. And to make a third Deadpool movie where it's Ryan Reynolds cracking jokes and it's not obnoxious to me at all, apart from that opening sequence that made me very nervous. They pulled it off. Every now and then a superhero movie will come out and be like, they did it again, or like, hey, they did it. They actually did. I did it with Spider-Man. Like, hey, with the No Way Home, right? It's like they brought the 3 Spider-Men together and it wasn't a complete disaster. It was actually a pretty damn good time at the movies. So yeah.
Saving grace for me is I'm back to being done with Marvel. They do not have anything I care to see.
Same.
That they really don't. And I don't think that Blade movie's getting made. Not anytime soon. I don't think that Blade movie's getting made.
This is the 3rd Blade movie, or the whatever Blade movie. 4th. Yeah, 4th. Yeah, this is it right here.
Fourth. Yeah, this is it right here. 4th. Yeah, this is the 3rd Blade movie. Or the whatever Blade movie. 4th. Yeah, this is it right here. 4th. Yeah, this is the 3rd Blade movie. 4th. Yeah, 4th. Yeah, this is it right here. I don't think that Blade movie's getting made. Even Wesley Snipes throws a jab at it too about how there's only ever going to be one Blade, and at this rate, he might be right. Um, but like the next one, I think Thunderbolts or something. It
Sure.
might be Captain America. It might be Brave New World, honestly. But there's another one that's part of this phase called Thunderbolts that's coming out pretty soon, I think too. But like I said, the world can live without the world will be fine without Steve Pulaski's further opinions on Marvel. I still think Guardians of the Galaxy was probably a better way to go out, but be that as it may, we got to segue to another ignominious superhero movie, though, by complete contrast, regardless of what you feel like with Deadpool and Wolverine. Um, as we've said before, the MCU has been a little bit on shaky footing recently with, they've experienced bombs for really the first time ever with Quantumania and the Marvels, especially. Um, but Sony's Spider-Man universe isn't doing too well either. There's a great article by comingsoon.net, excuse me, working off of an interview that was conducted on the website Comic-Con and also San Diego Comic-Con, the website Comic Book, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I talk for a living. San Diego Comic-Con's going on right now, so there's a lot of news that's coming out, particularly in the Marvel sphere. Madam Web producer Lorenzo D. Bonaventura, great name, was talking about sort of the aftermath, the shrapnel of that movie bombing, and also being one of the most eviscerated superhero movies probably since Morbius,
Yeah.
quite honestly.
Same studio.
Same studio.
Incredible.
Madam Web really was a case study in how a superhero movie can perform terribly too. Comingsoon.net really illustrated it in the numbers. It had expectations of grossing 20 to 25 million during its 6-day opening. Remember, it opened on Valentine's Day. And that's already a low ass figure for a superhero movie. It made 25 million over the first 6 days, but then it dropped 61% in its second weekend to $6 million. That is on the level of a horror movie, of that kind of a drop. Even successful horror movies like Saw 10.
With a budget of 100 million.
Yes. It only made about $100 million. So it has become really one of the biggest superhero failures of the modern time. I remember a great tweet a while ago that said, you want to preserve Madam Web's reputation and bring physical media back in the same breath, have the director, writer, and Dakota Johnson get them in a room, get him a couple bottles of wine, and do a commentary track over the movie. And then, like, you want to save physical media and you want to preserve the reputation of Madam Web, do that. And I completely agree. That shit would have done numbers like the black and chrome version of Fury Road on physical media. But I digress. Lorenzo D. Bonaventura came out, though, and said, and I quote, he said, that was a heartbreaking experience in the theater, like an axe in the head. He said, I think one of the things, and this is a longer conversation, which I'd be happy to have, this direct quote, I think one of the problems with streaming is that we don't know how to judge failure or success. Opening weekend, when it doesn't work, you just got slammed side of your head. And so the brutalness of failure really makes you concentrate on the next movie. And I don't want that experience again. So it's a harsher experience. So I think that has a lot to do with what kind of movies now that I look at, like, all right, how am I going to approach this? It's a little messy. Obviously, it's a direct quote and he's, speaking off the top of his head. But I think what he's getting at, though, is it's a good point, is that it's harder to judge movies in the era of streaming of whether they were successes or failures in a monetary external sense, which is a far less sexy conversation. Madam Web was a complete failure in the regard that it's just not a good movie. And that's my opinion, but that's also the consensus opinion around that movie, is that it's one of the worst superhero movies of the decade. But when you look at how it hit number one on Netflix, and streaming's not like home video. I actually had this conversation with Catherine this week. We were talking about physical media, and one of the things, if you look back, it's interesting. As somebody who reads a lot about movies, one of the things that's fascinating is go back and you kind of have to stumble into it. I don't think there's really a defined list, but movies that did not do well in theaters that were saved by home video
Yep.
and rental and rentals. A couple that come to my mind are some of my favorite movies of their genre. Tremors was a break-even movie
Oh.
in theaters. That movie was enormously successful. It was one of the best-selling DVDs or one of the best-selling VHSs for years, one of the most rented VHSs for years. And it lived then on basic cable, and it was good enough 6 years later, it got its first sequel and recently concluded. Then you had Joyride with Paul Walker, one of my favorite horror movies. That was another movie that did not do very well in theaters, but exploded on the rental market. And that was the difference, was that if you think about the structure of video stores could carry 10 copies of Joyride that could be rented out again and again and again. And that's continuous revenue that's coming in for a certain movie. So that's why even a lot of movies that did not do particularly well in theaters wound up getting sequels, because they knew there was a long game in store. With streaming, you still don't get the release of the numbers. And even when you do, it's never quantifiable in the regard was this movie watched credit to credit.
I really thought the SAG-AFTRA deal would like start revealing some of these numbers, but I guess that hasn't taken.
We talked about them.
I guess it just hasn't taken hold yet. I don't know. I don't know anything else beyond that.
Because we talked about that at length during the SAG-AFTRA strike, and then when the resolution came, it was one of the big hangups was streaming residuals, and we talked about this on the show. I said, I wonder now, if the residuals are going to come into play for streaming, are they finally going to release the metrics for how these movies do? Because it doesn't really mean shit that Beverly Hills Cop Axel F was #1 on Netflix. That doesn't really mean shit.
Right.
I mean, Netflix could control the top 10. I don't think it's a live updated thing. You know what I mean? Where they could control that as a marketing thing. So, I mean, for hell, it's like record companies paying for or pushing a song to get #1 on the charts. There's a difference between a natural #1 and a bought #1. And for music, especially country music, that's a whole other argument. But it's the same with streaming movies too, particularly the Netflix top 10 as it's known. Like, if there's no metrics to back that up, it's not like the box office where there's a cut and dry report every day of what movies did in theaters.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably the biggest thing that's something streaming services need to hold to their chest for their self-interest. And I thought SAG-AFTRA had nailed that down. Maybe we'll see eventually, but that's like the thing. That's like your golden goose that you cannot release, because you hold so much leverage by being so vague and continuing to mystify everything, right? They still want to live in a Nielsen rating world where it's all aggregates and averages as opposed to precise numbers, which they have, but then not for the investors. So we went on that little tangent, but for me, with this whole Madam Web situation, I just like this one quote from Sydney Sweeney, who was like, "I was just hired as an actress in it. I was just along for the ride for whatever was going to happen."
That's a great quote.
I'm just glad I was here, and kudos to her, because I mean, you're not gonna blame her for how that movie turned out at all. And full disclosure, I should say, I have not seen Madam Web. But once I knew that like this is in the same strain as Morbius, I'm like, yep, I don't need to see this. I don't need to support this. We're all good. I'll probably catch it in some other capacity like everyone else did apparently online. But for me, it's like, you know what? I'm at a stage now where I don't need to feel guilty about this. We're cool. I am curious to see how it affects the numbers and how it affects power players and all that. I do feel bad for, was it S.J. Carpenter? Was that it?
S.J. Clarkson.
Sorry. S.J. Clarkson. Respect the name for being a very effective TV director. Very extensive rap list if you look on her profile. And it just sucks that her feature debut was this film.
That's who I feel the worst for.
I genuinely feel bad for her because it looks like she got shafted. I don't know. Maybe she did just make a bad product. Maybe that is. I know the buck. Sometimes it's like being a president, right? The buck stops at you. Right. You do have to own it to some, unless you Alan Smithy that shit, that it does stop with you. But I do wonder how much was that with the, oh God, writing. Who was the writer on that? Was that also her? I don't think that was her as well. But regardless, I just want to say I do feel bad that that's the sad fact that her Wikipedia will now forever be haunted by that being her feature debut, potentially only feature, which tops it, which just sucks so bad. Oh boy.
On one hand, I like Emma Roberts' quote about how she said, like, if it wasn't for internet culture and everything being made into a joke, I think that the reception would have been different. There's a point there, but the problem is it was bad enough where it became a running joke. It was a snowball thing. It was bad enough like that. And that's the thing, when especially superhero movies, which captivate the culture, that are paid at that the reason they feel like bigger failures than they are is because here's the thing. If a crappy comedy movie comes out or a crappy horror movie, those are still, there's a segment of the population that really likes those movies and goes after it and sees it, doesn't like it. It's kind of the end of it. Where superhero movies span across generations of appeal, and they often do record numbers, that when a bad one comes along like Fantastic Four or Madam Web or Morbius, it becomes like a cultural event how bad it is, and its reputation starts to precede it. And then I'd also add to Emma Roberts' quote how she said, I personally really love Madam Web. I really enjoyed the movie. You also did Space Cadet, which was so fucking bad it was the first movie I didn't finish in 13 years. Like, you also did Space Cadet too, so that's number one.
It sounds, yeah. It sounds like
Fabulous.
It sounds like at best this movie would have been forgettable without the memification of it, like Morbius, right?
It's kind of true.
It sounds like, again, haven't seen it, can't judge, but it sounds like that's what, at best it would have been completely forgettable, and now at worst, but also maybe at best again, it's good in the way that it provides something for humanity. It provides something for the culture, and it provides another lesson that these studios will not goddamn learn. But we got some good memes out of it.
What if social media was around when, and this is the second time it's getting name dropped on a podcast. What if social media was around when Shaq's movie Steel came out? What if social media was around when Elektra came out?
That's a good point.
Like, you wonder, because there is an echo chamber of social media that plays into the perception of these movies. It's undeniable, even the good ones. You wonder, like, and I guess you could maybe argue with Steel and Elektra, they did not perform very well. Neither did Madam Web, but Madam Web had a way bigger budget. They didn't perform well at the box office. And I guess the standard of superhero movies wasn't what it was. What it is now. So I guess you could make that argument too, that maybe it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, because we haven't gotten like 30 examples of really good superhero movies from Marvel. But the whole Madam Web thing, to put a bow on it though, like, I knew this movie. I remember when I first saw the trailer, Catherine and I saw it, and I said, you know what, this actually looks kind of entertaining. This looks kind of entertaining. I like Dakota Johnson. Shout out Cha Cha Real Smooth. You can't see the poster, but I guarantee, I tell you right now, it's still hanging in my living room. I like Dakota Johnson a lot. And I was like, I'll see this. And I'm like off the superhero bandwagon, but I'll see this. And then, like 3 weeks before the movie came out, it was the end of January, and I remember I stumbled upon it on Facebook. It was an article of Dakota Johnson. And the fucking pull quote of the headline was, Dakota Johnson talks Madam Web. It was strange acting in front of a blue screen. And I said, that's the pull quote. What did she say? This is the press tour for this thing.
That's really funny.
And then I read it, and she was talking about how it was strange acting in front of a blue screen. And then another quote was, it's fascinating when you act in front of, I'm paraphrasing, but it's fascinating when you act in front of a blue screen. You don't know how it's going to turn out until you see the finished product.
Right.
And that's what she said. And I'm like, damn, you don't even have to read between the lines to realize, like, she's not a fan. And then a week later, she fired her agent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's all that needs to be said right there. So then when that happened, my expectations for that movie plummeted because I'm like, your lead star, who is not a newbie either, Dakota Johnson, this is not her first breakout movie. It's not like she doesn't know media training or doesn't know how to put a positive spin on things. She was in 50 Shades of Grey. She's used to having the spotlight put on her. For her to say that about that movie. I mean, it was one of the most damning things I've ever heard a lead actor say about a movie as big as that. Like, it was one of the most damning things. It wasn't like a movie 43 situation where nobody did press, which is a statement in itself, but it doesn't lead to headlines. That was when I realized I'm like, this is going to be trouble. Or I guess the only other point of comparison would be Jared Leto in Suicide Squad saying that like half of what we shot of me is not even in the movie or something along that
I mean,
line.
that's always the case, right? It's not always the case, but that happens a lot, right? So I don't.
Yeah, but Jared Leto didn't like Jared Leto. That made Jared Leto thought that he like lived shirtless and ate nails for breakfast, like means something. The way he acts.
Jared Leto, Jesus Christ, that's someone I just don't want to think about at all ever.
I don't sneak diss actors, but he's not one. And I don't. There's a very few actors I don't like, and he's one of them. There's very few actors for as many movies as I watch that I don't like.
Doesn't seem like you're the only one. Funny enough.
No, I know, right? So, no, I'm. There's another one I don't care for. Nick Swardson. That's another one I do not like.
Who's that?
He's the perennial background actor in Adam Sandler movies.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't like him. And the one movie they gave him to be the lead actor in is considered one of the worst movies of all time, and Bucky Larson, Born to Be a Star. So I rest my case.
Oh, this like Dane Cook knockoff? Like,
I never found him funny. The closest thing that he was good in was Grandma's Boy, and he was a bit part in that movie. That's another actor I do not like. I do not like him. Like just there's. I used to say there was never a good. And while I'm in the mood of people catching strays, is another one I don't like, and I hold to this. I don't think he's ever been in a good movie. I don't think he has ever been in a single good movie, and that's Rob Schneider.
You don't like him? You don't like him as a gigolo?
No, I don't like those. I never saw European Gigolo, but Male Gigolo sucked. I don't get the love for that movie either. I don't know if it's really love, but The Hot Chick's one of the worst.
Same thing you say when you hire a gigolo.
Exactly. Maybe love's not the right word. Yeah, everybody catching strays on Sleepless with Steve. But those, I could make a Mount Rushmore of actors I don't like, and those would probably be 3 of the 4 heads. I just do not. I think Rob Schneider in particular, I don't think he has ever been in a good movie. I mean, think about it. Grown Ups, Hot Chick, Deuce Bigelow, never been in a good movie. I could say different about Adam Sandler. Tyler Perry even been in some good movies. Anyway, that's our show today. That is our show, Sleepless with Steve. Start by talking Deadpool and Wolverine, end with some Nick Swardson and Rob Schneider catching strays. We need Joe back. This is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. Next week is Trap. And
he's going to do it again. He's going to do it to us again. We keep falling into the same trap. The same goddamn trap with this director. God damn it.
I'm excited for this movie. I really like the premise. I like Josh Hartnett in his first villain role. I'm really interested to see what this is going to be. Fun fact, and this is where we'll end things. Fun fact about this movie, I don't know if you noticed. Here, what if I told you this? We were originally going to review Harold and the Purple Crayon, but then I thought, you know what? Trap is so fascinating. Harold and the Purple Crayon's my thing. I'm not going to subject these two to it. I will be pissed off for the 3 of us at Harold and the Purple Crayon. We're going to review Trap. Both come out this weekend. Both come out tomorrow. Harold and the Purple Crayon was screened for critics. Trap was not.
Really?
Trap is the first M. Night movie not to be screened for critics. Lady in the Water, The Happening were screened for critics. Trap is not.
I wonder, is that a him move or did he get screwed over?
I think it's a him move.
And
I'm fascinated by this because I'm like, M. Night, After Earth was screened for critics. Like, and that was a fucking Scientology movie. Like, what? Why not? Is it a leak worry? Like, is it like a leak plot worry or something?
I know when video games do this, it's a very bad sign. It's like they
When
don't.
movies do it, it's a very bad sign, traditionally speaking.
Also
Because
true.
if a movie's good, why would you not want great press leading up to it?
I don't know. I really don't.
That's I'm fascinated. I was stunned when I saw critics on my Facebook talking about how shocked as I was that this thing wasn't screened for critics. There's no reviews of Trap now. So that has me really curious to see, because that trailer's great. That trailer's great. And it wouldn't be the first time M. Night pulled a fast one on us in the trailer regard, though. That's for sure. It can't be. I shouldn't say this because I'll jinx it. It can't be any worse than what his daughter made us watch this year. It can't be any worse than what Hollywood's latest Nepo baby made us watch. Everybody catching strays on Sleepless tonight.
Yeah.
That is our show. I'm really going to end right here. Well, Joe Viso will be back next week. Dominic Guanzon, thank you so much for hosting the show today, allowing me to spew my venom towards the end of it over here.
No, that was the other movie. That was the other Spider-Man movie.
For Dominic Guanzon, the unseen but still deeply loved Joe Viso, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve.